Ownership and property rights are fundamental concepts that determine who has the ability to use, control, transfer, or protect what they own. This applies to many things in our lives, whether it's your home, your business, or the land you have. Understanding these rights helps us know our responsibilities and privileges when it comes to property. So, to begin, let's explore what ownership really means and how property rights work in different contexts. Let's dive into the core idea of property rights. Essentially, property rights are the legal rights that allow someone to control a property. This means you have the authority to use the property, keep others from using it without your permission, transfer your rights to someone else, or even give up your rights if you choose. Understanding these rights is crucial because they define how property can be used and managed, ensuring clarity and protection for owners. When we talk about ownership, one of the key aspects is the right to use the property. This means everyday control over how the property is utilized. Typically, ownership includes a right to use the property for lawful purposes, whether that's living in a house, farming land, running a shop, or even renting it out. However, this right isn't without limits. Your use of the property must comply with laws, zoning rules, and safety regulations. Essentially, you need to use the property responsibly. In practical terms, these use rights are what transform the idea of ownership into something tangible, allowing you to interact with and benefit from your property on a daily basis. Here, we're focusing on the right to transfer property. This means that as an owner, you have the ability to pass on your property to someone else. This can happen in several ways. You can sell it, which is transferring ownership in exchange for payment. You can also gift the property, which means giving it to someone without expecting anything in return. Lastly, you could bequeath the property, which is to leave it to someone through your will after you pass away. Understanding this right to transfer is crucial because it highlights one of the fundamental powers of ownership. Here, we're focusing on a fundamental concept related to property rights, the right to exclude. Essentially, this means that the property owner has the authority to control who can come onto their land or enter their property. Without the owner's permission, others are not allowed to enter, use, or remain on the property. This is a key power because it gives owners the ability to prevent trespassing. In other words, if someone enters a property without permission, the owner has the legal right to stop them. This right to exclude is central to ownership, as it helps maintain control and security over one's property. Now, let's talk about the right to dispose of property. Essentially, this means an owner has the ability to alter, damage, or even destroy their property if they choose. In other words, you have control over your property, including the power to decide when and how it ends or changes. This is a core idea in property rights. However, it's important to understand that this right is not absolute. There are legal limits in place, especially when disposal could affect public safety, violate environmental regulations, threaten historic preservation, or infringe on the rights of others. So while you have control, it comes with responsibilities and boundaries designed to protect the broader community. Ownership can take several common forms, each with distinct characteristics. First, we have fee simple ownership, which is the most complete form. It gives the owner broad control, allowing them to use, transfer, or manage the property as they wish without limitation. Next is leasehold ownership, where the right to possess and use a property is granted for a specific term defined in a lease agreement. This form is time limited and does not convey full ownership. Lastly, there's a life estate, where ownership lasts for the lifetime of a specific person, after which the property passes to another designated party. This means ownership ends at that person's death, making it linked directly to a lifetime rather than indefinite control. Understanding these distinctions is crucial because the same property can be subject to very different rights depending on which form of ownership applies. When we talk about property, it's important to understand the difference between real property and personal property. Real property includes the land itself as well as anything attached to it, like homes and buildings. So, when you own a house, you own the land under it too. That's considered real property. On the other hand, personal property refers to movable items that you own. This includes things like cars, furniture, jewelry, and other personal belongings that aren't fixed to the land. The key distinction here is whether the item is attached to the land or if it can be moved, Attached items are real property, while movable items fall under personal property. Understanding this difference is crucial in many legal and financial contexts. When we talk about shaping something, the key idea is that whatever you create, you can actually own and protect. Intellectual property is a legal tool that helps you do just that. It safeguards your inventions, your brands, and your original expressions. Ideas themselves are valuable and they count too. For example, a patent is designed to protect new inventions and useful processes, giving you exclusive rights to your innovation. Trademarks, on the other hand, protect brand names, logos, and symbols, helping you build and maintain your brand identity. Lastly, copyright covers original works like writing, music, art, and media, ensuring that your creative expressions are legally protected. Together, these forms of intellectual property help you create with confidence and secure your unique contributions. Here, we're looking at the difference between public and private property. Public property is open to everyone. It's shared by the community. Examples include parks, libraries, and streets, places where anyone can go and use the space freely. On the other hand, private property is owned and controlled by individuals or businesses. Think of homes, offices, or stores, where access is limited and determined by the owner. So, the key distinction is whether the property is shared among the community or reserved for personal use. Understanding this helps us know our rights and responsibilities in different spaces. Owning property gives you significant rights, but it doesn't mean you have unlimited freedom. There are laws in place that can restrict how you use your property, especially when public interest, safety, or your neighbor's rights are involved. Property rights are powerful, but they always come with boundaries. For example, zoning laws control what types of buildings and activities can take place in specific areas, helping keep communities organized and safe. Environmental regulations limit land use to protect water, air, wildlife, and special protected spaces from harm. Then there's eminent domain, which allows the government to take private property for public use, but they must provide fair compensation. And nuisance laws prevent property owners from using their land in ways that unreasonably harm others, balancing individual rights with community well-being. So, while owning property gives you control, these rules ensure that control is exercised responsibly and fairly. On this slide, we're focusing on the concept of eminent domain. This is the government's power to take private property for public use, such as building roads, bridges, or schools. However, it's important to know that when the government exercises its power, it must provide just compensation to the property owner. The core idea here is that while private property rights are fundamental, they can be limited when there's a legitimate and legally recognized need for the greater good of the community. In other words, the law balances individual rights with public needs, ensuring fairness through compensation. Property rights are about much more than just possession. They fundamentally influence who has the ability to build security and wealth over time. When we talk about wealth building, ownership plays a crucial role. Turning property into equity and income creates opportunities not just for the owner's immediate benefit, but also for generational wealth that can be passed down. Assets that can be used, transferred, or inherited become powerful financial tools. They offer long-term leverage that supports economic growth and stability within families and communities. However, unequal access to property creates significant challenges. When certain groups face barriers to buying, keeping, or inheriting property, wealth gaps tend to widen, limiting opportunities for future generations. These limits have lasting impacts, shaping economic landscapes and opportunities for decades to come. Understanding this connection between property rights and wealth is key to addressing economic inequality. Let's wrap up with some key takeaways about ownership and property rights. First, ownership really matters because property rights define who has control, what choices they can make, how they're protected, and ultimately the value of what they own. Second, property rights come as a bundle of distinct powers. These include the right to use, transfer, exclude others, and dispose of the property. It's important to understand that these powers can be separated and aren't always held by the same person or entity. Third, ownership takes different forms. Property can be private or public, it can be shared, and it spans a wide spectrum from real estate to personal belongings and intellectual property. Next, while rights are protected, they are not absolute. Various laws, zoning rules, taxes, and even eminent domain can limit these rights. So, ownership always exists within a legal and social framework. Finally, strong property rights play a crucial role in building and sustaining wealth. They encourage people to invest, facilitate exchange, provide security, and enable long term planning. In summary, property rights fundamentally shape how ownership functions in our everyday lives, influencing everything from individual control to broader economic stability.